Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever been in the middle of a chess game online when all of a sudden the connection bars of your opponent go to 0 and an auto-resign countdown begins? Yes, you are defeating your opponent and they are rage quitting. Sometimes it's hilarious when there's 30 seconds left on the clock and they're like, and then they get mad, they close the app on their phone and they lose on time. But sometimes they leave you sitting there for 30 minutes. It's extremely annoying. And maybe some of you watching this are guilty of it yourselves. Sometimes we can't control our emotions, so rather than hitting that resign button, we rage quit, we say no more, but technically the game is still running. Well, what if I told you that in the year 1895, two of the world's most renowned chess players were involved in a situation quite like this one? Well, we are in Hastings in England, yeah, this is a story of an IRL rage quit by Grandmaster level players. Now, if you're a chess perfectionist, a lot of you watching might not know this, but the Grandmaster title didn't technically exist in 1895, but these were Wilhelm Steinitz was the first ever world champion. Kurt von Bardeleben was technically a 2600 rated player, so I'm giving him honorary GM titles, kind of, but also not really, but kind of. So, yeah, story goes like this. Both of them were having pretty good tournaments. They were playing each other in round number 10 or something like that. Steinitz began with e4, e5, and back then it was pretty well known that this was the best opening for both sides, which is kind of insane considering to this day, this is still one of the best openings for both sides. Here there are a handful of gambits, like white has various center gambits, white of course has the Evans gambit. But Steinitz would play c3 and try to build for the center with d4. Still very, very, very much normal play. Black plays the move knight f6. This counterattacks the pawn on e4. And basically from 1895 till maybe about the next 30, 40 years, the move d4 happened. And then nowadays, d4 has been proven to be totally equalizable by black. So people play this, which is the gioco pianissimo, which is quiet, right? But d4. They were unafraid. And if black plays passively against this setup like this, black just is dead lost, actually, because white can play e5, and black has to strike back in the middle, because if black doesn't do that and allows the pawns to stand around, there's all sorts of tactics on the king. On the very weak f7 pawn, you always have to keep an eye on that pawn near the king in e4, e5 positions. So black needs to seize the initiative back before white overwhelms, which is why black plays the move bishop to b4 check. And even to this day, this is the meta. Now, technically there's two threats right now. There's the pawn on e4 and there's the king. And you actually can't defend both of them, because if you block with the knight, I could actually just take this pawn. I have to, deal with various tactics here, but I'm always able to defend myself with the d pawn, and black is just better now, right? So white kind of has to know what they're doing. Nowadays, bishop d2 gets played quite a lot. People don't really take here either, because there's all sorts of goofy tactics on f7. Yeah, something like this is very common. Black goes d5, and this position at top level play has been reached a bajillion times, which is a real number, by the way. But back then, they at no chance at all would play this. They would always play toward the middle. Everything has to do with the middle of the board. And you really need to take the bait. You have to take this pawn, white castles, and then black has to take this, and then kind of hope that they survive the attack, right? Or there's even positions where white goes d5, doesn't even take, bishop is hanging, knight is hanging, black has to know how to equalize here. Very scary stuff. But instead of that, Bardeleben was I'm not going to take the pawn because this goofy bozo over here, Mr. Steinitz, wants me to do that. I don't think bozo existed. If I could go back in time, I know there's a lot of good things you could do for history, but introducing the word bozo to England in 1895 might be up there. Although I don't know. Maybe the etymology of that word. Is that the right word? Etymology? Whatever. So yeah, he's I'm not going to take this pawn, but I will attack the center with the move d5. So as you can see, all the principles are sort of there. Both sides have now played at some point or another all four of the center pawns out and about. It didn't, hyper-modern chess or modern, I believe that's the school of thought, after Nimzovich, which meant controlling the center from a distance, not with actual physical center pawns, only came about in early 20th century. So they would always do stuff like this. This isn't quite a loss of a pawn because the knight is pinned to the king. So we have ed5, knight d5, and castles. Now, however, there is an attack on the knight. And you'll notice that this knight on c3, although it could be taken, really not advisable. If you take on c3, I can take back like this. I can also probably just throw in a check first because the king is worth more than the queen. So bc3, bishop c3, and a very common idea here to permanently prevent castling is bishop to a3, and black is completely lost because your king is stuck in the middle. Like, you could try to, first of all, you can grab the rook, but then I even throw in this check, and I mean, it's just murder. But I can also do things like just take, go d5, I mean, take that pawn. It's a really dangerous position for black. So instead of that, Kurt von Bardeleben decides, I'm just going to kind of close the center. No problem. Now, white is better here, but white is only better if white takes over the initiative. How do you take over an initiative? First of all, what is an initiative? I throw that word out in some videos. Maybe you remember, probably you don't. Initiative is a sustained attack, a sustained set of moves against your opponent that create threats, but don't sabotage your position. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to give you an example. Well, the example in the game is the best move, but rook e1 here, for example, is a nice idea, which pins the bishop, thus removing the defense of the knight. Knight takes c3, there is this, and then again, there's all sorts of tactics. There's bishop g5, but speaking of bishop g5, that was the move that was played in the game. So just developing a piece. For example, if the move f6 was played here, you would not retreat the bishop. You would immediately go after the weakened bishop with rook e1. Both of these moves have greatly improved white's position, and they are creating threats. Therefore, they justify what an initiative is. Black goes back to e7. Now, at this point, it really depends what you take. If Steinitz had taken this bishop, it would have been recaptured with one of 4 pieces. Obviously not the king, we can throw that out. So which of the pieces would have captured it? Well, this knight. Why that knight? Because you cover your king with an extra layer and you reinforce the knight in the middle. You defend it 3 times now, and overprotection is good. I mean, it's just like that's your strongest square. You don't want white to break through there, right? So it's important Steinitz takes the right thing. So he doesn't take that bishop. He takes this bishop. Okay, so, sorry, that is definitely not a bishop. The knight, he takes the knight with his own bishop. If this move were to be played here, that wouldn't work because you can take this bishop and then immediately go after the weakened king. Queen e2, even d5 to open up the king. Very bad position here for black. So instead of that, black takes on d5. I'm so excited. I'm like, I thought there was hair in my mouth. I don't. Fellas, if and when you get married one day and your partner has long hair, you are probably going to end up with it in places that you never thought were possible. Kids, you can ask your parents. Bishop takes d5 was played here. This is now very well insulated. The king is ready to castle. Steinitz is not going to let that happen, though, as he grabs the bishop, now justifying a response by black. And again, you need to justify a response by black here. So you take. Of course, you're not going to take and sacrifice your right to castle. So knight e7. And now, fellas and ladies, you do make up now 5% of the viewing audience. 5%. It's a record. That's never happened before. In any given period of time, the average viewership was always about 1.5 to about 4.5%. I think over the last... I don't know, 3 to 6 months, it's like now 5.2%, 5.3%, something like that. So breaking records out here. And yes, it is that low in case you thought it was closer. So there's a move we have to make here by white to prevent black from castling. If you said queen a4 check, technically you're correct. That's not the move though, because here we still have to make the move. The move is rook e1, and anytime a loose piece like this is in front of a king, and the king wants to castle, you want to attack that piece. Because rook e1 is an effortless move. It does not take any time whatsoever to play this. Just play it, right? What black should do now is play f6, which is exactly what he does. He plays the move f6, and the idea of the move f6, first of all, is that you want to go king f7. Like, you don't want to go king f8 because then you block your rook. So you've safeguarded the knight, but you've permanently sacrificed the right to castle. You still have to defend the knight. You can't just go over there, and your rook is stuck. But f6, king f7 is generally the way to go, and this is really a good move to repel the enemy knight. So now my knight can't actually move forward, and since I also can't go this way, and going this way is just stupid because I don't have any prospects beyond that. Like, okay, I'm not gonna go in on those two squares, so I just have to go back, right? So technically this move is fantastic. I mean, it's a wonderful move. So black wants king f7 and to bring the rooks. And you might be wondering, Levy, I have now watched 10 minutes of your video. You have still not gotten to the point. Clickbait! I'm gonna call all my friends and tell them you lied. You know what your friends are gonna tell you? Nothing. Get some friends first. I'm just kidding. I'll be your friend. But not in like a call me up or, you know, post my phone number on Twitter kind of way. Lot of references in today's video. A lot of references. If you know that reference, it's funny. If you know the reference before that, it's also funny. A lot of references. I'm in a good mood. I played an hour and a half of squash today. Not that you had to know that. Also came home. Lucy made a beef curry bowl. There's quinoa in here, vegetables, sweet potato, which I believe is a vegetable, so I kind of sound stupid. Drinking a little bit of a little fizzy drink here. Anyway, let's get on with the game. I know some of you hate when I go on tangents. Some of you enjoy it because it makes for a fun viewing experience, but some of you hate it. So queen e2, checkmate is threatened. And those of you that hate that I go on tangents would have blundered mate and won here with h6, queen takes e7. Now, black defense. And king f7 is coming. King f7 is coming. And listen, I gotta give it up for the bearded fellow Kurt von Bardeleben because he has done a very decent job here of defending his position. Steinitz brings the other rook. That was the only piece that was not playing, and we have pressure on the c-file, and things are in decent shape. Black now should go king here, bring the rooks, and this video will never happen. But he didn't do that. He was worried about the pawn here for some reason, even though it was defended, and played the move c6. Now, he probably thought, I will go here next move. There's no rush. I will then bring my rooks. I will then centralize my knight and plant it there forever, and I will not lose the game. An example of what could have happened if he had put his king on f7 is exactly the same thing. He could have played c6, king would have been safe, rooks come to the middle, but because he did it with this move order, the calculating monster, the at the time best player in the world, although I think he held the world championship match until the previous year, 1894, so maybe second best at that point. He took over the initiative here with the amazing move d5. And legend has it, he calculated this entire sequence of moves to the conclusion. d5 is what we call a clearance sacrifice. It was important for him to unpin himself, that is Kurt, because d5 gets the d4 square. By force, you can't take like this, you can't take like this because mate in one, and you really should take like this if you're going to take with anything. But actually, the best move is still to unpin yourself. One last chance, but Kurt was like, the heck's this guy doing? I just take. But now here comes knight d4, and there's a few problems. So knight f5 wins the game, because queen takes mate. Queen h5 is a threat. There's also various weird threats of sacrificing the rook if absolutely necessary. Black plays king f7, and Steinitz drives the knight into e6. Black must have thought he was still completely okay, right? The knight maybe can move, maybe the rook is going to go trade, and that's exactly what he did. He moved the rook so the king could go here. The initiative is dead, certainly. The only way to prevent king to g8 here is to make such a powerful threat that move can't happen. Not check, because that literally forces the king there, but queen g4. And queen g4 has two very nasty threats. The first of which is to take this pawn. The second of which is that's a loose queen. So knight g5 check hits that queen, right? And Steinitz had foreseen all of that, and at this point, Bardeleben was like, uh-oh, am I gonna end up in a YouTube video 126 years later? Because I really hope that doesn't happen. 27, it's 2022. And he played g6. And now Steinitz plays knight to g5 check. But luckily, Bardeleben can still defend himself, and the position looks okay. But it ain't. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you had the patience, viewer retention is about 51% on my YouTube channel. This video is definitely not at the 50% mark because the game is almost over. Hopefully you made it this far, because in this position, Wilhelm Steinitz detonates savagery. Rook takes e7. What? Here's the point. Queen e7 doesn't work because X-ray vision, right? The queen, through this queen, sees the rook. And if takes, what would happen here is black is forced to trade queens, because that's covered. Queen d8, takes, and you don't want to play an endgame down a knight against Steinitz. Although your knight kind of gets a little bit stuck, you can always get it out with g4, etc. You also actually cannot take with the king, because rook e1 check, and then wherever the king goes, it gets absolutely just slapped around. I mean, it's like on the verge of mate constantly. Queen f4 check, king c6, knight e6, although the game would still go on, okay? But Bardeleben thought he had caught Steinitz with the move king f8. Amazing move, amazing move. Not even taking. You can take the queen, but lo and behold, hello? We've completely forgotten about this rook. And if black takes the rook, it's mate. You lose. Uh-oh, and if rook takes c8, I just create the same threat. Now, white has a bunch of moves here, knight h7, whatever, but none of them work. The only thing that works is rook f7 again, forcing the king to move, because we know that the queen can't take, because we would just take the rook. If king goes back, now it's mate. Now it's a totally different story. But king g8! Bardeleben must have thought, oh, this dude fell for my trap. Rook g7! Oh my goodness, if king g7, now you take with check. If queen g7, we still take the rook. King h8. What do you think the move here is? The same, the same idea. Look at this, man. This is absurd. This doesn't look real. Boom, 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 boom. And he's actually making progress. You're not just going to repeat moves. You're not going to repeat moves. You would think that the king would just shuffle back and forth. Well, when this move got played, Kurt von Bardeleben looked at his opponent and straight up did this. And legend has it that my man left. He was seen pacing somewhere. I don't know. I mean, this is all legend, right? It was 130 years ago. Nobody knows. He was pacing around. He refused to come back inside. He was mad that the spectators were applauding. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And he just literally rage quit. He just let the timer run to 0. But my dude just left. He just peaced out, went to get the McDonald's or the 1895 equivalent of McDonald's. Maybe a guy on the street named Timmy making hamburger. I don't know when hamburgers were made, but yeah, he was so mad that this rook just stunted on him on the 7th rank. I mean, come on, every single move is a threat. And the craziest part is, this is not the conclusion. When Steinitz realized he was being BM'd, right? Bad manners, I believe that's what that stands for. What Steinitz did when the game clock ran out and he was ruled the winner, he showed that he had foreseen checkmate in 10 moves. He had foreseen checkmate in 10 moves by force. Would you like to see it? Queen h7, of course, rook c8, and the same thing happens. So king to g8, right? And I just said that you cannot dance back and forth. Otherwise, black would be able to claim a draw, right? No. The reason you need the h-pawn gone, right? There used to be a pawn here. You need it gone because in this position, what happens is you play queen h4. Then you force this. No other move. Now you go here. Only move by black. You cannot take the queen because mate. So you give a check. Only move is to come here. You give a check. Now black has a choice of moves here, but Steinitz had worked out that the path to max resistance was to go here. That's mate in 5 for white. These two are mate in 2 and 3 respectively. Or 3 and 2 respectively. So king to e8. Now you want the king back here. So because you want to give him a check. So check. You force the king in front of the queen again. Now you get closer. And now one of these moves is made in 3. One of these moves is made in 2. This one is made in 2 because you take and take. But this move, check, here, only move, check, only move. And the queen smothers the king to death with the defense of her knight. And for about 13, 14 moves in a row, black was unable to capture the white rook for mate. Steinitz, the Chad, Wilhelm the Chad Steinitz, let his opponent rage quit and then proceeded to show the entire live audience that he had foreseen checkmate in 10, and there was absolutely nothing his opponent could do about that. I mean, my lord, is this not the most savage moment in chess you have ever seen?